We have a huge advantage as guitarists because we can actually play the chords and hear how the harmony sounds. If you're learning a new jazz standard, then you want to play through the song, just use simple basic chords so you can hear how the harmony is moving, how the chords actually sound and what is going on. And there's no reason to make it more difficult than it has to be. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can play simple voicings like that, but I'm also going to show you how you can apply that to a song, how you can take it to the next level by adding some extensions, maybe even use them to play a chord melody or add some walking bass and chords. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. A shell voicing consists of a root, a third and a seventh. So if I want to construct a C major 7 shell voicing, then I will play the root, the C, and then go to the third, the E, and then I have the seventh, the B on top. But there's also another variation of a shell voicing for a C major 7 where I have the E on top, so I would start with the C, then I would add the B and the E on top of them. Usually when you're playing shell voicings on the guitar, then you have sort of the chord part of the voicings, or not the root, on the middle string set, the D and the G. And that's just a good range to have sort of the core part of the chord. And that also leaves a lot of room because we have 2 strings under it to have the bass note, and we actually have 2 strings above it where we can add extra notes, melody or extensions. Changing the major 7 chord into other chord types is pretty simple because we only have a few notes. So if I take my C major 7, then I can easily change this into a C7 by just going from a major 7 to a flat 7. And in the same way I can turn it into a C minor 7 or a C diminished or even a C7 sus4. A few of these voicings are a bit ambiguous because some of them will actually depend on what kind of fifth is involved. But I'm going to return to how that works a little bit later in the video. If you want to practice the shell voicings, then a good place to start is to take a shell voicing through a major scale, and in that way just practice the diatonic chords in a major scale with all shell voicings, like this in C major and G major. When you practice diatonic chords like this, then you're already starting to group them together in the way that you're going to encounter them in songs, as you will see later in the video. In this example, you can also see how when we're playing the voicings like this, there's no difference between a minor 7 and a minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished voicing. That's because the difference is the fifth and we're not playing that note. But as you will see later in the video when I start applying this to a song, then most of the time it's going to be pretty clear from the context whether it's one or the other. So this would be the first 8 bars of Autumn Leaves, and I'm really just starting somewhere with a C minor and then trying to move to an F7 that's close by, and in that way I just keep on moving through the harmony, and the voice leading pretty much takes care of itself, and you can clearly hear what is going on with the chords. The way the voicings are made, then I also have a part that's bass note and then a part that's chord, and I can use that to add a little bit of groove in there by just playing the bass note as a separate layer, kind of. So in that way I can actually already play just a complete groove with a complete harmony only using 3 notes. In the second line of Autumn Leaves, then we have an A half diminished that I'm playing like this. And of course that could also be an A minor 7 shell voicing. So we can't really tell if this is A half diminished or A minor 7. But let's say that I'm playing the song and then I'll play a complete A minor 7. That sounds like this. So here you can hear that that's a little bit surprising and it doesn't sound wrong, but it's certainly not what we expect. And that kind of tells us that our ear is actually filling in that flat 5 due to the context of the song and the key. So this sounds much more natural. And really this is just demonstrating what I say quite often, that in music, context is everything. Now that you know what you can do with the basic shell voicings, you can also start to explore what can happen once you start adding notes. And of course we have the 2 top strings to do that. So if I take the C minor 7 shell voicing like this, then I can of course just add the 5th on top like this for the next string, or I could add the 11th, the F. So there's a really simple way of just adding some extra notes. Of course you can start using the top string as well. If I do the same with the F7, well, I can add the root on top like this, or maybe a 9th, or I could double the 3rd, or even use a flat 9. And if you really want to open up for a lot of options, then a solid thing to do is to leave out the root and turn them into rootless voicings. So you have, instead of this, you will have this for a C minor, and then you have much more freedom to add notes on top, and that can give you something like this for a 2-5-1. Using the shell voicings as a foundation for making a chord melody, so harmonizing a melody, is also often pretty practical, because the design that we have now is that we have the chord that we're playing on the middle strings and we have the bass on the lower strings. So if we play the melody on the top 2 strings, then it's pretty easy to put a chord under it. Just to give you an idea about how this works, here are a few bars of Body and Soul. Trying to make a chord melody arrangement in this way, then you may find that sometimes you need to move the melody around a bit just to find a place where the chords are gonna be a little bit easier to play. That's also happening in this example. So here I'm playing the melody like this. And then I'm moving all the way up here because that makes it easier to add, especially the G flat 7. And what you will of course also find once you start getting into this is that some melodies will just have a range where there's going to be one note that's not going to fit on the top strings, or there are going to be other things that you need to puzzle a bit to figure out. But starting with this will get you really far and actually cover most of what you need. The chord melody arrangements are of course an example of how we can be really flexible with the top 2 strings, and the same goes for the bass string. So that means that if we're playing shell voicings like this, then we actually have room to add an entire bass line, like a walking bass line. And that could be something like this. Playing walking bass and chords is a really great way to just lay down a complete groove, and it's something that I'm using really often when I'm playing with vocalists. I'm not gonna go into how I make the bass lines because that's something that I've made several videos on, and I'll link to a playlist with a few videos that you can check out in the description of this video. The shell voicings are of course about being practical, but they are, as you can tell, also a really good starting point to really just develop your comping and add colors and be flexible with the chords that you're playing. Something that in general you want to be able to do, because in the end it's not about learning some static grips, it's really about improvising and adding color to whatever chords you want to play, whether you're comping or playing a chord melody arrangement. Another great way to really expand on how you comp and the different colors that you have available is to check out some 3-note voicings. Purely because they're easy to play, but you're also flexible to do a lot of things with them. And if you want to check out some different 3-note voicing types, then check out this video where I'm covering them and also talking about how to apply them to some songs and some common chord progressions.